Hi, I'm Michael of M.O.D Services. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make a figure 5 and 0, that's 50k, 5 and 0, and you're going to carve out from our cake. This is our red velvet cake, and this is our fruit cake. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere.
In our very first video, that was the part 1 of this, we carved out our 5 and 0, we ganached that, and this is a part 2 of that video. So the cake was supposed to be covered in black fondant. We rolled out our fondant and we covered the whole sides of our 0. Then we had to create our sharp edges. Yes, we had to make sure we've covered it very well. We've trimmed off the excess and we're smoothing that out. Once you are done, you're going to cover the inside, that is the inner part of our 0. Yes, covering figure cake can be sometimes hectic or tedious, but can also be fun. So we cover the inner part of it, and when we were done, we had to open that up so we can roll our very last fondant, which we will lay on top of our 0. Then we flip and work on our sharp edges. Someone will ask, how are you going to work on this? It is very possible. So we reached out and cut the excess fondant in our 0 as well. Then we had to just open the fondant. Yes, this is how we did the opening. Then we rolled our very top one, gently flipped it on top. Then we had to flip that and work on our sharp edges now. So if you check closely, our inner part is covered, our outer part is covered. So now you're going to reach out for our smoother. Then we start smoothing our whole 0. Yes, so you're going to press gently till it meets the very top. It meets with the very top, as we normally do with any cake or any sharp edges we mostly do. So it's just as simple as ABC. We just press gently and make sure it was meeting very well. Then we reached out to our palette knife, that is our artist palette knife. Then we trimmed off the excess. That is what we did with this one. It's super easy. It is super fun to cover, or should I say super fun to decorate a figured cake. Yes, especially if you know you've tried well. If not, please, you end up finding difficulty in everything you do and you end up complaining. Yes, so please make sure no matter what, charge well and do the right thing for them. So we just work on our edges, cut, then we worked again to make sure we have a super clean edge. Then we trimmed off the very excess. Yes, then we have our super clean 0 cake. Here we go, we cut off all the excess fondant. Even the tiniest piece needs to go off. So we have a super clean, super sharp edge. Then we reached out to the inner part of our 0. We did our sharp edges, smoothing that out to make sure it was meeting with the very top fondant we rolled earlier. So please, the sharp edges is very important, and you have to be extra careful so you don't end up messing up your whole cake. Because remember, we carved this cake out. It wasn't a 0 cake, it was a sheet cake, and we had to carve it into a 0. So we trimmed off the inner part as well, worked on it very well, smoothing that out, and when we were done, we flipped onto our main board. And here we have our clean cake. Super clean, super sharp edges. That is our 0. Then we had to make sure we worked on the edges again. We had to make sure it was super clean, super sharp. We worked on it with our smoother. Then when we were done, we reached out to the inner part. We worked on that as well. Then we set this aside and reached out for our 5. So here, just as we did, we covered the whole side and we just trim off the excess fondant that was left. When we're done, we just opened that up and we rolled our fondant. We all know 5 has some sharp corners, so we had to work on those corners to make sure it's very sharp and clean before we even work on our very top edges. Yes, so we smoothing that out and we rolled our very top fondants to cover the whole 5. We dusted with corn flour, then we flipped so we do not end up having our fondant sticking to our board when we are done with our sharp edges. So we flipped onto our main board, then we smoothed the inner parts when we were done, because definitely that part was lying on the board and we couldn't really find or see it very well. So we worked on the edges now. So we pressed to make sure the sides is meeting with the very top fondants we covered with. we did that all round, made sure we were able to cover most of the part. You know, 5, we went out, we went with our own format, so it was not that simple 5. No, we have the inner part look having its own shape, so we had to just make sure we were doing the right thing by achieving our sharp edges from all angles. So we kept on smoothing, we kept on going, but when we got to the inner part, we were very, very careful. We had to be super careful because in here, as you can see, I was using my hands. The fondant meter couldn't fit in there, so we had to come up with something to make sure we had a smooth finishing in there as well. So we reached out to the outer part and we kept on smoothing. Then we had to trim off the excess after we had our fondant meeting with the very top edges. So we kept on trimming, smoothing, trimming, smoothing, so we were done completely with all our figure 5. Then we just had to go to the inner part of the bottom 5 to make sure it is super clean, it's super neat. So we just kept on going. Every angle matters, and 5 has those sharp angles and figures sometimes at the very tip. So here we reached out to the inner part, we trimmed off the excess fondant gently and carefully. So we reached out to our longer palette knife, that is our test palette knife, to make sure we were making sense in there. Then the excess fondant at the very top, that is after flipping our cake, we had to make sure we trim that fondant off before we flip onto our board. And here we have our 5 and 0. Now we were supposed to transfer onto our main board, and this is how we did it. We added parchment paper, flipped our fondant onto it, that is flipped our 5 onto it. Then we pulled the parchment paper to help us push our cake onto our main board. Yes, that is the easiest way to push your cakes, especially if it's a structured cake or something. Yeah, because if it was round, we just lift it onto it. But here we have curves and we have our figure 5 here and there. If slightest mistake, you're going to break this cake into 2, which we didn't want that to happen. So we did that with a 0 as well. We added parchment paper, then we just gently pulled, and here we have our cake. We steamed our cake to make sure we have our excess corn flour coming off. Then we reached out for our glitter. You all know this pump can be hectic sometimes, can be a headache. It wasn't coming, so I just reached out for my brush, dabbed it in there, and started brushing my whole cake with my glitter and edible spirit. Then when we're done, we reached out for our orchids. We sprayed our orchids in gold. That is what we used in decorating the cake, and this is the celebrant's name. So when we were done adding our orchids, we airbrushed it because it was pink, and we airbrushed that into gold. It was for a man apparently, so we had to make sure the pink wasn't really visible. So we had to airbrush our gold again and make sure our gold was very visible. Then, because we had some things on there, we had to splash gold. Yes. So we splashed gold on our 5. Then we came up with this lovely, beautiful 50th birthday cake for our birthday celebrant. At this point, I hope you've learned a lot. You've learned something new. You've learned a new technique or something from this very cake. Part 1 is also on this channel. I will link that to this video so you can get access to our part 1. I am Michael of M.O.D Catering Services. Thanks so much for joining me to this point. See you in my next video. Bye.